Welcome to this discussion of Brick City and a screening of the show. For those of you who are from Boston, you may wonder, Newark? Brick City? Isn't Boston and Cambridge and Harvard Brick City? I mean, after all our bricks came over on the Mayflower, we're convinced. So I went on the web to find out why Newark's called Brick City. I'd heard some stories. Turns out the web has lots of stories. So I called the New Jersey Historical Society today. It took 3 calls before I finally got the official New Jersey Historical Society version of this, which is one of the ones that's on the web. Basically, after World War II, around the country, lots of cities built high-rise housing projects. Newark built its of bricks. And so it became Brick City. Last year, Brick City, as in the show, won the prestigious Peabody Award. And we are now in the middle of the second season on the Sundance Channel. Here's what the New York Post recently said about Brick City. From a storytelling perspective, Brick City is rich. Paragons of law enforcement clash with ministers of anarchy, and a metropolitan hangs by its fingernails. Can't get more dramatic than that. A charismatic leader, Mayor Cory Booker, declares he can turn the city around. The numbers, the municipal deficit, and the murder rate tell him otherwise. Yet, reports the Post, Mark Levin, who's with us tonight, the director and executive producer, is much more positive. He says, I don't want to sound like Don Quixote, but I think Newark has a shot. Levin continues, there will be folks in Newark who will be screaming no matter what we do. I hope they've learned to respect us. We are there to capture and chronicle what's happening. So here it is, what's happening in Brick City. You're used to this by now. Come on. No, that's right. Welcome again. Let me introduce our panelists this evening, 2 of whom you have already met. Let me start, however, with Mark Levin, who's the director and executive producer of Brick City. He's perhaps best known for his film Slam, the 1998 hip-hop trilogy, which won both the Sundance Film Festival's Dramatic Feature Award and the Cannes Film Festival Golden Camera Award. His documentary credits include Mr. Untouchable, the story of the Harlem heroin kingpin, Nicky Barnes, Protocols of Zion, a street-level look at the resurgence of anti-Semitism since September 11, 2001, Twilight Los Angeles, an adaptation of Anna Smith's one-woman play on Los Angeles riots. Levin was the executive producer of the critically acclaimed Showtime series Street Time and directed 13 of its episodes. And he's also directed numerous episodes of the classic series Law and Order. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jawe Morris was born in Newark, but spent a large part of his youth outside of New Jersey, in Phoenix and elsewhere, and then returned to New Jersey, where from 1996 to 1999, he was the starting quarterback for the Orange High School football team. He played football in Delaware State University, as you saw on the film, was first black team college All-American, AP first All-American, and Sports Network first team All-American. He's the author, as you saw in the video, of War of the Bloods in My Veins, which won the 2008 African American Literary Award in the biography memoir category. Jawe is the founder of Jawe Era, which includes his mentoring group Full Throttle, and he's also had extensive media coverage, including Essence Magazine, Don Diva Magazine, Jet Magazine, Rolling Out Magazine, and Hip Hop Weekly. If you want to know more about him, you can easily find it on the web. Gary McCarthy isn't on the web a lot. But if you're a police chief, that's probably good news, right? Director McCarthy began his law enforcement career in the New York City Police Department, where he followed both his older brother and his father. He rose to command 3 different precincts in the city, the 20th on the Upper East Side, the 33rd precinct in Washington Heights, and then also the 70th precinct in Flatbush and Brooklyn. In 2000, he was selected to be NYPD's Deputy Commissioner for Operations, which gave him the major responsibility for strategic law enforcement. And in 2006, new mayor, Cory Booker, selected him to be the head of the police department. As Mayor Booker bragged in the show, Newark is no longer one of the top most dangerous cities in the country. I looked it up this afternoon. CQ now has you down to 23rd. In fact, murder peaked a year before Director McCarthy came to Newark. Last March, a 44-year record was broken when Newark actually had a month without a homicide. I also need to recognize one member of our audience this evening, Rose Schlossberg. She's a production associate with the company and a graduate of the Harvard College. Where are you hiding? Ah, there you are. I get to start the questions this evening, and I'm going to direct it to Mark. Why? That is, why Brick City? You must be asked this question a lot. You had a lot of choices about what to do a documentary on. Why pick Newark?
Well, for a few reasons. First, I want to acknowledge my partner right here, Mark Benjamin, who dragged me back home to New Jersey, where I grew up, to meet some young men, and I think Jaweh was actually one of them, who wanted to do a film about gang life and were wondering if I would be a creative consultant. I was kind of intrigued by that request, and that led myself and Mark to eventually sit down with the mayor. And when the mayor said that he wanted to make Newark a model for urban transformation in the United States, I was like, well, what does that mean? And the word change obviously was just starting. This was, I think I met Gary in the summer of 2007. Was just starting to gain momentum. And I'd always looked for an arena where we could kind of look at what does change mean, both on a political level and on a personal level. And I guess the other side was that in the world of television, we know reality TV has exploded. And coming out of the documentary world, having worked both in feature films and in what we call scripted TV series, I felt there was an opening, there was another way to tell nonfiction stories. And so this was a tremendous opportunity to try to shape nonfiction storytelling, not like you see on Jersey Shore or Housewives of New Jersey, but much more like a scripted series, but it's real. These are real people. And I think finally, the whole question of democracy is not a spectator sport, certainly sitting here with you and everyone else, that TV, yes, we want it to be dramatic, we want it to be compelling and involving, but we also wanted to catalyze people to take action, to get involved, to be citizens, to know how it works. And when Mark and I first went out, a lot of people said, well, what are you, crazy? You want to do something about how a city is changing? Why don't you go to C-SPAN? Who's going to ever watch that? It's a bore. Maybe at a university like this, you could go to a public policy class and talk to some people, but nobody else is going to be interested in that. And I was like, wait a second, this is the essence of human drama. People are trying to make a difference. They're trying to change the way they live and the way their community lives. What could be more dramatic? So I think that was the starting point for us.
Fine. Jaweh, let me just ask you about the scene with the football team. Did they pay attention?
I believe so. A big part of what wasn't captured on that was the reason why I even went there to speak to them. Like I mentioned in high school, I lost one of my good fellas that was on the football team. He got killed, gang-related. So I knew all the emotions that went through the minds of a 16, 17, 18-year-old that lose a good friend, you know what I'm saying, on the high school team. So when they asked me to come in there and speak to them, that's what I came in there for. I came in there to let them know that for a lot of them, they want out of the hood. They want out of the life that they live in, and they have to use the opportunities like on that field as they take it out. So it really come down to choices and decisions where tonight you can hop in that car and go ride, or you can just play harder for your dead homie. And that was really the message I wanted them to leave with that night, was to motivate them, you know what I'm saying, to dedicate their lives to that field, man, because that is the ticket for a lot of us out the hood.
Now, you were lucky because you ended up having enough skills to go on to the next level. How many of those people on that team have that set of skills?
From that scene?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you right now. I wouldn't know. Few of them did go to school, though, but I couldn't give you an accurate number, though.
Director McCarthy, the drive around the city, how much impact does that have? It's the fall caravan, right? The fall safe caravan?
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in affirmative police work. Makes a difference. If you put a cop on a corner here, you might displace crime to another location, but you're not preventing crime.
I think you said that as well.
Yeah, well, he's right. The fact is, cops getting out of the cars and engaging people prevents them from carrying guns. If they stop carrying guns, people stop getting shot. I mean, that's a secondary motivation. Everybody knows about broken windows, and preventing little things prevent big things. But when we first implemented our quality of life program in Newark, probably the best scenario that could have happened within the first 2 weeks that we were doing it. And long story short, 2 police officers stopped somebody for public consumption of alcohol, for drinking a beer in public. When they stopped him, they found that he was carrying a gun. When they searched him further, they found that he was carrying 2 guns. When they took him to the station house and ran his fingerprints, they found out that he had just gotten out of prison because he had shot somebody on that corner 6 years previous. So boil that story down to this. If those 2 police officers didn't take the opportunity to intervene in a public consumption of alcohol, we definitely would have had a shooting, most likely would have had a murder on that corner. So it's not so much driving around, it's where you go, it's what you do when you stop at those locations. That was more of an effort to spark the community interest, gain some momentum, correct. Gain some momentum to the crime prevention programs that were already in place.
What about the gun buyback?
I love this debate.
What?
I love this.
Okay.
I love this debate.
I don't know very much about it, but there are more than one economist around here would say, well, you take one gun off the street and another gun will replace it.
Right, but if you take the right gun off the street, and if, everybody always, the scenario that I like to talk about is people say, you get old women who come in and they sell their husband's gun, and the husband died 10 years ago, and that gun is just sitting in the closet. So you got the wrong gun. Until she gets burglarized. Then we just got the right gun. So, we got assault weapons in that buyback program. I'm sorry. You saw the high-capacity magazine. As a matter of fact, I turned to Mark Benjamin, who was sitting next to me. Talk about timely. Does the word Tucson mean anything to anybody? High-capacity magazines. You take a 7.62 bullet, which the lethality factor is through the roof. Now you put 30 of them into a magazine. Any shootout, if you know these statistics, it's 3 out of 10 hits. That's the average.
I was trying to do the math on your discussion.
Every 10 shots, usually you have 3 hits. Now you've got a more lethal round, and you've got 30 in a magazine. The likelihood is people are going to die. So you know what? I dismiss those arguments, quite frankly, because we got about 200 or 300 guns. I forget the exact number when we did that buyback program. But the best example, a gang member's mother brought in an AK-47. So you know what? Right there, that whole endeavor was worth it for me. And by the way, if we want to talk about stopping it on the other end, we could go into that too. But just for
that was another discussion you were having with the mayor about the traffic in.
Exactly right.
Mark, how did your view of Newark change as you did this show?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, you have on the stage here, this is fascinating. I mean, you can't change a community from the top down or just from the bottom up. There's got to be some communication between both. You need grassroots activists, you need people who are working in the community, making a difference, and you need leadership, you know, in the political, law enforcement, business community. Now, I guess the biggest change for me was, you know, if you think about what's happening right now in Wisconsin and all around this country, civil servants are being, you know, kind of scapegoated. You know, they're the reason this economic collapse, they're the reason the states are going under, the cities are going under. And I have to say, I came away after 3 years with a renewed respect, maybe even I shared some of the stereotypes of faceless bureaucrats or community activists who just go around and scream and yell but don't really do anything. And I think I have so much more respect for people who are public servants, the sacrifices and what they go through to try to do the right thing. It's you don't get the rewards you do in the private industry. And I'm amazed by it, that people do it. And on the community level, moved by the efforts of so many people who you don't really hear about, or again, community activists has almost become like a put down. You know, you hear somebody say, oh, that's some community activist trying to organize people, as if that's a bad thing. So in spite of all the madness, and Newark has certainly got a lot of wild characters, larger-than-life characters, and critics from all directions, and I grew up right around there, I left with a renewed sense of hope.
Jolly, what's next for you? I mean, your book's out, doing well, you've got a lot of attention. Where do you see yourself going? What impact do you try to have next?
Well, like in the beginning of the clip when it first came on, I'm real big on paint a picture and lead by example. Like, I'm real big on that. And like Mark said in the beginning, you know, it's one thing to say a lot of what we want and what we don't want, but if you don't have any action behind that, it falls on deaf ears. So like, through the book, through the exposure from this series, I use that as motivation for those that don't get to lead a city. And that, for a lot of us, is the reason why we don't hope anymore. That's the reason for a lot of us, why a lot of us, especially from the inner cities, don't feel no more, because we don't know the other side. We don't have anything to measure it against what we know every day. So with that being said, throughout my traveling, you know, events and opportunities that I've gotten, I use that as times to create more exposure for those that's still in the city. So basically with the program I got is Full Throttle. I started that with 12 of pretty much the wildest individuals in my neighborhood. That was all under 18. Youngsters, babies, 16 years old, in a house having to take care of 2 siblings with no parents. Like, I hand-selected those 12, and basically, at this point, I just want to grow it. I want to grow it. I don't want to just be the one that constantly telling them what they should and shouldn't do. You know what I'm saying? So I use my life experiences as a platform to pretty much get them to make better decisions, because I'm all about altering behavior. So, you know, to answer your question, what's next for me is that I want to take Full Throttle to a higher level beyond just the sit-downs in the basement or the sit-downs in that room, but now actually getting them out there, getting them into school, like you asked me earlier, getting them into these jobs and these trades, and, you know what I mean, keeping them out of those situations they're in. That's the next level for me, is actually showing what I'm doing and then having the statistics to show the results of my program.
Okay. Gary, let me just ask you, you end up with a mayor who's often described as charismatic. That wasn't a really clever observation, was it? How does that have effect on you as a, to use Mark's phrase, civil servant? How does that affect your ability to function, your ability to have an impact?
Well, we have a very simple rule in the Newark Police Department that at any event, I speak before he does. So, I mean, that's really how it affects my life. It's amazing. You know, Mayor Booker recruited me to this job after spending 25 years in the NYPD. I worked for Rudy Giuliani. I worked for Mayor Bloomberg. I I work for Ray Kelly. I work for Howard Safer. So I have a little bit of an array to look at different leadership styles. And Mayor Booker, he had me at hello. Let's put it that way. He has that charismatic personality. He's incredibly articulate. He's effervescent. He's vibrant. He's all these things. And what that does is that energizes me. Because you know what? Believe it or not, going to crime scenes all the time, I mean, one of the things that I didn't say before, that I was going to be a little bit blunt and say, well, invite those economists to come to the crime scenes and walk through the shell casings with me and see how they feel about a gun buyback program. You know, after going to crime scenes, after seeing horrific things happening day in and day out on a daily basis, after dealing with human tragedy, you kind of get tired and you kind of get beat down. And what the mayor does, probably better than anybody I've ever worked for, is he's an inspirational leader. And he knows how to push buttons like a coach, right? You had great coaches, you had bad coaches. A good coach knows when to push a button and you know, pick you up versus giving you a kick in the butt to get you moving. And his personality really is what's kept me there, and it's what keeps me going. The way it works out functionally is, you know, because of his rock star status, as we like to refer to it, he's able to do things that other people can't do, like get $100 million out of somebody for education. He's able to raise funds
Just
for our police. Hypothetically.
Yeah, right.
It would be better if he controlled the schools, but that's different too, obviously. All I needed was 9.5 to stop layoffs, and we couldn't come up with it. But the fact is, through philanthropy, he's able to expand the park system in Newark. He's helped. We started a police foundation where in 1973, the New York City Police Foundation started to buy bulletproof vests for police officers. Then it expanded. We're using our police foundation because you know, they were using typewriters when we got there, buying computers, putting computers in cars, getting cameras in cars, all of these technological advances. The mayor is involved in raising money for those. So besides his personality, there's a functionality to it also.
It's time to open the floor for questions. There are microphones around the room. You please come to a microphone and wait your turn. The rules here at the forum are pretty straightforward. This is not your opportunity to learn to imitate Fidel Castro. Instead, you are supposed to say what your name is, where you're from, and then ask a question being a short sentence with a question mark at the end. Who would like to go first? I've never known Harvard students to be shy.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, sure.
Yes,
Sir.
Hello, my name is Guillermo Hamlin. I'm also a resident of New Jersey. I'm a huge fan of the show. Now let me follow up my question. This is to McCarthy. You've mentioned before that nobody really trusts an outsider. Being a philosophy major and anthropology major, I learned that oftentimes there are culture-bearing groups who have values that they cherish and often are not really willing to trust one that is willing to alienate those values. How have you grown or tried to establish an affinity with the Newark residents being from the Bronx?
That's a great question. It's a little bit further than that in Newark. It's not as simple as, which is pretty deep actually, but it's not that simple. Newark hasn't gotten over the 1967 riots. And what you see on film is you'll see generational activism where, you know, they show Ras Baraka. His father, Amiri Baraka, was an activist. And there's an element within Newark that is, they call it the old guard. And they've held on to Newark for so long that they don't want to let it go. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm big into business practices, and if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. So I'm trying to bring change to that, and people are always uncomfortable with change. But the key to successfully working with the community has to do with communications. So what you don't show is that 2 or 3 times a week, I'm at a community meeting, and I'm talking to people on a very personal level. and communicating what the values are. Because you know what? The values are generally going to be the same. People want to live securely, they want to feel safe, and they want a police department that's going to be functional, which, you know what? Those are kind of my goals. So finding those common grounds and talking to people about that. And I hate to do this, Mark, but
Yes.
I'm going to tell you a couple of things that
Shake it up.
that kind of trouble me a little bit about the series.
That's
Is that
fine.
you're going to see the same people screaming the same things over and over again. Okay, you're looking at about 25 characters that are screaming the same things over and over again. That's not the widely held belief in the city. I mean, I walk around, or I drive around the city, or I go to the store, I go to the supermarket, and I get stopped left and right with people thanking me, telling me what a great job the department's doing, and telling me how much they respect what's happening. So I believe that feeling is being overcome. I think Mark and Mark kind of give these folks a lot more attention than perhaps they represent of the populace.
Can I just
Yes, you
respond to that?
certainly can.
Listen, I'm not going to say that we don't look for dramatic characters who,
You don't have to look for
and sometimes we call them political performance artists. That's true, but at the same time, Ross Baraka, whose name was just mentioned, we didn't elect him to the city council. The South Ward did. I don't want to give away what happens in the series. So obviously, you know, and the popular rage that some of maybe what Gary would look at as the professional demonstrators, if we just look at what's happening in this country in terms of small groups that have gotten tremendous attention because they are lightning rods for a populist anger that's out there, which is very real, no matter who the characters are. I think that's important. And in Newark, it kind of took a different form than the Tea Party or the way we may see it on Fox News. So, you know, that's, you know, part of the process. But, you know, one of the things that I just want to say is that Gary and I have had an ongoing discussion about, you know, how to interact with the community, you know, because I respect Gary tremendously and really believe he's done an amazing job. And he knows there are many times I've gone to community meetings with him and said, you know, how do you put up with it, you know, in terms of some of the feedback. And one of the things, though, that Mark and I have always, you know, wondered about is this idea of a dialogue between certain people from the gang culture, the street culture, and city officials and law enforcement officers. And I know that a lot of law enforcement and political people also feel, you know, not only is that risky, because you don't know necessarily the behavior of people you're going to be sitting down with, but you don't want to condone criminal behavior, or certainly understand that. And one of the interesting things that I just know a little about, that Gary has informed me a little about, but that there is a program that I think is actually connected to this school here, called Operation Ceasefire, that David Kennedy has put together and has, you know, tried in a number of communities that has been successful in reducing violent crime, especially amongst young gang members. And I think it's going to start in Newark. That's what I've heard.
next month.
So, you know, Gary and I do argue and debate a lot, and Jaway and I do also. But, you know, I see that as a sign of progress.
Jaway, you want to add anything to this discussion?
I mean, I guess ultimately, you know, the big thing I'm on is communication. I mean, for many years I was, like he mentioned, even be on the stage right now in this situation wasn't something I would have done before. But when you look at the bigger scheme of things, like from the politics on down in the street, we all comprise that city. And that's why I'm here today, because at the end of the day, it's all about resources, all about solutions. And that's where I think that up until this point, we've been failing to do that. You know what I'm saying? To establish that communication line between what's going on behind the closed doors and what's actually happening on the street. So, I mean, again, it's never about condoning the activity that's going on, but you do have powerful people that's on the street that do have influences and that are upright. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I come in at. You know, I speak for my fellas, I speak for the streets as a whole. And at the end of the day, it's all about bettering a situation. It's all about creating more opportunities for them. And that's something that I'm working on now. You know what I'm saying? Is that communication line between those that's on the street and those that's in the politics.
Jaway, I have two questions for you. The first one,
Who are you and where are you from?
Oh, I apologize. My name is David Donaldson. Summers were spent in Nutley, New Jersey, outside of Newark, but originally from Detroit, and from the education school. My questions are, how do appearances, specifically here at Harvard, affect, for positive or negative, your relationship or credibility with your friends back home? And second, my only connection to Mayor Booker is what I see by following him on Twitter. So to me, I see him, shoveling cars out of snow and losing weight. But what is the real opinion from people of Newark of the mayor? I'd just like to hear your perspective, and thank you for coming.
That's a good question. On a serious note, though, perception, we know perception is a big thing. I mean, from up top to down bottom, perception is a big thing. I just said a few minutes ago, though, prior to this day in the past, I would have even never been in a situation like this. But I've learned to get outside of that perception. Because at the end of the day, to me, it's about saving lives. And if it takes bridging certain gaps to create those opportunities for resources and opportunity, then I'm all for that. So I think a big part of it is how much you can endure. You know what I'm saying? How much you endure, because you're going to hear the comments. Everybody's not going to be supportive of what's going on as far as the streets and dealing with those that's in politics. Everyone's not going to be supportive. So my concern and interest lies in those that want those opportunities. So I'm willing to take on all of that come with the territory. It's good. You've got to take the good with the bad.
Sir.
Mark, what were the rules of engagement with Mayor Booker in terms of when you could film him and for how long you could film him?
Sir, would you tell us who you are and where you're from?
My name's Harvey Yazid, and I'm from Wayland, Massachusetts.
I would say that we've forged a kind of an understanding that if the mayor, and really this goes for Gary and for Jaway also, I think it all the way around, because we were in sensitive situations, was if they were going to let us into confidential meetings, into situations where there could even be lives at risk, depending if the information got out or was mishandled, that Mark and I had to be open also. We had to reciprocate, meaning that our whole creative process and our editing room, our studio had to be open. It had to be open to Gary, had to be open to Jaway, had to be open to the mayor. Not saying that they had final cut, because even we, the way the TV business works, the network has final cut. But that they were going to be part of the creative dialogue. And we couldn't, and there were certain meetings we would go in, or certain situations we were in, where if Jaway asked us or Gary asked us to turn the camera off, the camera would be turned off during a certain part of the meeting. If the mayor said there was something that was potentially, if it ever got out in the news, we would embargo it. Mark would guarantee that the footage was not in any way leaked. There was no way anyone else would see it besides us. So it really goes to a question of trust. It wasn't contractual. It wasn't a matter of getting lawyers in a room, which is kind of the standard way of in the film or TV business. It was much more about building trust between people. And I would say the trickiest part of it, you see it right here, is that when you're moving between, Mark and I originally thought the way to do this was we're going to have 3 different crews, so that the crew that was with Gary, or the crew that was with the mayor, or the crew that was Jaway or with Jaden Creep would all be separated, so they wouldn't know what was happening in each other's world. It just worked out that ultimately it was really an A crew, one crew, that was moving between all of these characters, and it was just a matter of trust and respect that we never pushed in places we didn't belong, and it was reciprocated, that Jaway never asked what was happening at the police station. The police never asked, what did you see over in the Central Ward? So I can't say there was really a formula that we used. It was really, I guess, the most basic of human relations, of just building a friendship and a collaboration.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I'm from New Jersey. My family's from Newark. I have 2 questions for Mark. The first one was, obviously you have so much footage, you're filming a lot of different things. How do you make the decision of what makes it? Or do you go in kind of with some general themes? Are there specific messages you're trying to get out to the audience? Or did it kind of come out after filming is over? And then the second question is, looking back at the first season, were there any conscious changes that you made going into the second season in terms of things you thought you could have done better or things that worked, and how did the public's reception play into that?
I think that the basic thing is that people want to know who these men and women are, the personal, to get behind the official events. So certainly there was more pushing in that direction in the second season. Look, we had 1,000 hours of footage. That's a lot of material to go through. I guess the simplest way to describe it is a distillation process. It's funny just seeing the football scene, with you. I know that in many ways that was the beginning of season 2, when we saw that scene. Just the way it's shot, the way it looked. Of course, it was at magic hour, it was at dusk. It looked like a feature film, kind of the beginning of a feature film. These two gentlemen are so charismatic on camera. I think our biggest problem with them was we had too much. There was so much material. They hold the screen. People will walk in the editing room and say, I want to see more, I want to see more. So in the end, I guess it's that old cliche that the material tells you where to go, meaning that we did try to shape these much more like a dramatic series, like The Wire, The West Wing, something like that, The Shield. So you may have had a lot of other great scenes, but they didn't necessarily contribute to the story, or let's say the A, B, or C story that was running in this show. So it didn't really have a place. But that is a process that takes a lot of time and some very, very talented editors to work with. But it was also a lot of fun.
Sir.
Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm a sophomore in the college, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight and being such an inspiration. I know we've talked a little bit about sort of the personal aspect of this show for each of you guys, and I guess my question is, how, if at all, has this show brought you guys together?
Who wants to start? See, I've only been brought together with these guys for the last, half hour, so I don't really, have a lot to contribute. This is the first time I've seen somebody in the forum stump an entire panel.
Well, I'll take a shot at this. I mean, Mark and I have had a relationship basically since, what'd you say, 2007, I guess, when you guys first came to town. And they spent so much time with us. And I think they enjoy the fact that, people always ask me why did I allow, as a police leader, this type of access, because it's kind of dangerous. And my answer is, I don't hold my tongue. I don't worry about what I say 9 times out of 10. A lot of people who work with me can tell you that. And I'm encouraging transparency. As a result, I spent so much time with these guys. Stop laughing. He went to college with me. It goes back 30 years. As a result of spending so much time, when these guys are by, they'll call me up and say, let's have a beer, let's watch a basketball game, let's do stuff like that. Quite frankly, Joey and I don't think ever really met and shook hands until tonight. We just, don't move in the same circles. That's just the way it is. And I just want to add one comment that about something that we were talking about before. We target behaviors as police officers. We don't target people. So if you got what I was trying to say in that one scene when we were talking about narcotics dealing and some violence on the corner, I'm less concerned about somebody being a gang member. I'm more concerned about them being a drug dealer. So I don't have a problem working with anybody. I always say that I'll work anywhere, anytime, and meet with anybody to talk about anything. So those things have to be separated. The behaviors versus who people are by way of labels is almost irrelevant to me.
Either of you else want to add anything?
I guess I'll just say, just to piggyback off of that, I've known him since '05. A big part of, I think changing things like that come with exposure. So it has to be that. I don't have the capabilities of getting on a network to necessarily get a message across the world. At least not right now. They do. So I think it's definitely a relationship that's built over the years. And Mark said the key thing it was trust, because in the beginning it wasn't like this. You're always looking for ulterior motives and agendas and things like that. But I guess just over the course of time and the consistency of it, you know, to get the understanding of what the message that they were trying to get out. I mean, it's respectable when you kind of develop relationships and bonds with people when they're taking your life, you know, and they're exposing it to the world. And I mean, it's done a lot for myself and for where I'm from, just on the ground level, just with the exposure and just motivating and exciting those that were a part of the project. So, I mean, we're definitely tighter today than we were when we first met. You know what I'm saying? I got a lot of love for them. Mark as well. They've been around my family and my household. You know, where I'm at is real secure. Like, they come to my house, they know things about me, you know, no one will really know. So I've just always been appreciative of the opportunity just to get our story and message that we pushing out to the world.
Well, I would just say that besides, you know, tremendous respect for both Gary and Joey, that when it all started and we met with a few of the young blood filmmakers, I remember one of them said to me, you went to Columbia High School, which high school I went to right outside Newark in Maplewood. And I said, yeah. And they said, have you gone by and seen the CHS, Columbia High School? And I said, why? And they said, you're going to see the C crossed out. And I kind of laughed. I said, wait a second, you tell me that some blood climbed up the tower of Columbia High School and crossed the C out because it stands for Crips? And they were kind of looking at me, nodding their head, and I said, wait, there are Bloods and Crips in Columbia High School. And they said, Mark, you know, you've gone all over, you've done all these films, you don't know what's happening right in your own backyard. You need to come home. And I remember driving back with Mark that afternoon, and I looked at him and I said, that line is going to haunt me. You need to come home. So I've learned a tremendous amount from both of these gentlemen.
Sir.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Gray. I'm from Philly. I have a question for you about the impact of violence in Newark. In Boston, we've done a lot of research on folks that have been exposed to traumatic events like the shootings and stabbings that I think those young people have been exposed to, and that it leads to sometimes further victimization or further violent acts. So in addition to ceasefire and community policing and things of that nature, I'm wondering if you've seen in New Jersey things like we have in Boston, which are community-based behavioral health interventions that help the young people, through people that look like them, that live in their neighborhoods, reduce their symptoms and get their lives back to normal.
I could comment a little bit on that. I think that all of those programs are phenomenal. And people always ask me about, you know, well, what type of programs does the police department have for youth and so on. Those programs are great. But our prime focus is on stopping the crime now. We're talking about growing programs for the future, and I endorse that wholeheartedly. I really like the ceasefire idea. I see that as a game changer, not only in Newark, but across the country. I've become a believer. I get it. I understand the legal cynicism. I understand the criminalization of communities. I understand the tactics and the unintended consequences that we're having. But the simple fact is, all of those things, while they may reduce crime, that's in football we say, I'm staying in my lane, okay? My lane is right here, and we're going to pursue that with some of those other programs that I'm talking about. That's all community health programs, which are just as important. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching this clip again is, what is the cost of a murder on a community? And we know that there's actually a financial cost. And I think it works out to every murder costs the city something like up to $800,000 in revenue loss and tax base and so on and so forth. So, you know, dollar-wise, penny-wise and dollar-foolish sometimes. We ended up laying off 164 police officers at the end of the day, in a place where we've been struggling to reduce the murder rate, reduce the violence in the city. We have some success, and all of a sudden we get the rug pulled out from underneath us by laying off 16% of our agency. So, you know, it just keeps getting easier, if you will, in Newark. But I mean, I endorse all of that stuff.
But that speaks to, I think, the ultimate challenge that this season, the question that was asked earlier, how do you lead, how do you change, how do you move forward in what is now an age of austerity, where leaders no longer are handing out goodies in the patronage system of old, but it's how many jobs are going to be lost? Where are we cutting? Just look what's happening right now, both in Washington and in states around this country. In fact, the kind of programs you're talking about are the first ones on the chopping block. In fact, this whole phenomena, what's amazing is it's not even discussed. It's not even on the public agenda. You know, what's happening on the streets, the violence in the streets. I mean, I just came back from Tucson, actually, where it's, let's have arms on university campuses. That's the direction in Arizona right now where it's moving. That's legislation. So I think that's part of what pushed Mark and I, you know, was to try to find a way that in an entertaining way or a way that could bring an audience in a time where we as a body politic seem to be going in the exact opposite direction.
Can I just comment?
Sure.
I'm sorry, and I'm not going to disagree with you, but I think, you know, when we talk about things like the gun debate, you know, it's become so polarized that you've got abolitionists and you've got militias, right? And those are the people who are having the argument, where the rest of us have to get involved in this and bring it to the middle of the road. That's what it really boils down to, because there's ways to do both. There's ways to protect our rights to carry firearms, and there's ways to stop people from getting killed in our inner cities. And I don't think that, that we as Americans should ever give up on that, quite frankly, because it's too important. I'm preaching a little, I apologize. A little passionate about this.
Hi, I'm John Solo. I'm a freshman at the college. I'm from Turkey. Before anything else, thanks for the show and thanks for coming here and speaking to us. I had a question that I guess goes to Mr. Levin, and that is, I feel like when people see cameras, it's natural for them to act. When I see a camera, I pose and try to look good. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like that is part of human nature. Do you think, I mean, you said this project was part of an idea about how to, you know, show nonfiction on TV somehow. Do you think the existence of cameras affects or distorts reality at any point?
Yes, I do. But I think we live now in a society that's so mediated that everybody's on camera at all time, whether it's willing, where cell phones and everybody's walking around taking pictures, or it's unwilling, it's just a surveillance society. You walk outside, you're in the elevator. And also this, the first few days, the first few weeks, but after a while, you know, you just get used to it. So I think that there is, we joke, well, yeah, we're trying to put the real back in reality, you know, because you look at reality TV and it's totally fake. It's not just because the cameras are there, it's because people are being paid to act out and, you know, do crazy stuff. So I think there is a lot of authentic behavior and experience in this series.
How about you two guys? How do you react? Do you get used to the camera after a while? Is it sort of like, oh, they're back again with the camera? It's, you know, oh, you know, must be Thursday or something. I don't know.
Nah, the cameras, I mean, I guess the part I'll speak to is just being comfortable with. I've been dealing with cameras for a long time, just playing sports. So, you know, you get used to, you know, having the cameras around, and, you know, a lot of times you forget they're there. So, I mean, initially when something new was taking place, you're mindful of it, but, you know, when you're serious about what you're doing, you know, you focus on what you're doing. So, I mean, the comfortability level with me, I mean, a lot of times I don't even know when they're there. It doesn't affect what I'm doing, because what you see on here, I'm doing when they're there or when they're not there. And I've been doing that prior to them coming around, so it's really not much of a change for me.
In my case, I made captain in the NYPD in 1992, and reaching, I guess that's upper middle management, I had to start realizing that as police leader, I had to pretty much behave like I was on camera all the time anyway. And I mean, that's the way I've lived my life since 1992. And quite frankly, you know, as long as they stayed out of the bathroom, I was comfortable. You know, I honestly didn't even notice when they were there half the time, to the point where, you know, people would bring it to my attention. I'm like, yeah, so what do you want me to say? I mean, you know, I'm a very candid person, so I don't have any issues with it at all. And I think one of the first conversations we had when Mark reviewed film, he said that to me. He said something to the effect, and I forget what terms he used, but it was like, you know, you could tell that I'm just not acting, I'm just Gary being Gary, right? Oh no, that was Manny. I'm sorry.
Sir.
Hi, my name is Clay Duma. I'm a senior at the college from Los Angeles. First of all, thank you to the three of you for coming and speaking to us. And I have a question that I'd like to hear from all of you, but specifically from Mr. Levin. To the extent that this show has helped to sort of positively reshape the contours of city governance in terms of opening up the lines of communication and increasing transparency, do you see this as a model to be replicated in other cities around the country? And do you have any plans at some point of maybe exporting it to other states and other cities?
We have discussed that. I mean, that's quite frankly why I was in Arizona. I've been talking to the mayor of Phoenix. Yeah, we have looked at other communities, and I mean, you know, it's funny, IBM has a campaign now called Smart Cities. I don't know if you've seen it. But part of what they're pitching is of interest to me, this idea that cities are the incubators of change in the 21st century, that we're in this global economy. It's not countries, it's not states, it is cities. And, you know, that idea does intrigue me, you know, that cities not only across the United States are doing interesting things, but across the world, and that these are going to be kind of the nexus points that somehow, you know, direct where human energy is going to be going. So yeah, we've definitely thought about it. Forrest Whitaker is also a partner of Mark and mine, and this is part of this whole process that interests him a lot.
Amy Perlmutter, originally from Maplewood. I grew up down the street from Mark with his sister. And I have a question for Joey. And I'm just curious what change you're seeing on the street level. Are things getting better? And then a question for anybody, and I feel kind of strange asking this, but is there a worry that if things clean up too much in Newark, it's going to get gentrified like Hoboken and Jersey City and really change the community?
Well, I guess I'll start with much of what I'm about to say you'll probably never see, but I know how things were when I started with my fellas on a conscious level, and I know where I'm at today. And you know, you see the opportunities, you see the situations and the incidents that happen where under one circumstance the response would have been one thing, and through the consistent, I mean the day in, day out beat down that I'm on top of them. You see, like, when opportunities present themselves, how they respond to them, from those that's back in school now, those that are working now, and just typical street squabbles, you know, fights, and just the way their conflict resolution and the way their value systems, and it's a lot different now than then. So, I mean, these are things that we don't necessarily get to show statistics for, but I'm there. You know, I know one of my fellas that's 15 and now that's 18, and now I see how he manages situations and conflicts and things to that nature. So for me, in the inside of it, absolutely, I've seen progress. And that's not to say that's for all of them, though. Everybody don't bite at the same time. Some are just not willing to change at all. You know, so, you know, I've seen a firsthand experience, a lot of progression, specifically for my fellas.
I think one of the things, you know, you talked, Amy, about gentrification. It's true that Newark now is kind of the last holdout between what has been gentrified along the coast of the Hudson River across from Manhattan and the suburbs where we grew up. And I think that is a concern to some people in Newark, absolutely, that some of the old guard and people who've lived there for a long time and some of the poor people could be displaced. But you got to go back to after the crash of 2008. I mean, this is just devastating cities. And it has hit Newark hard. I mean, this is a big part of what this season is about and what Gary just referred to in terms of the layoffs. This is brutal. I think Newark was on a trajectory to certainly move forward, certain areas possibly even be gentrified, but this is just so hard-hitting what has happened. It's like a slow-motion Katrina. In fact, we haven't seen, I mean, I know we're all seeing the news now, but it's even next year they say could be worse in terms of city budgets and what we're struggling with here. So right now, I would say that's the big issue, is just how the economy is impacting the direction that the city has been going in.
I invested way too much in my condo, so I actually would like to see a little bit of gentrification just to get the price back up to where it should be.
My name is Daphne Beal. I'm a Harvard alum. I'm a reporter. I grew up in New Jersey. My father was born and brought up in New Jersey, but that was 1902, so it was a different city then. But I have a question, maybe primarily for Mr. Levin, but maybe for all of you. Why is there no woman on this panel? And also, I found the coverage of women in the film to be very slim. And there are women gang members, there are women in gangs, there are women who support gangs, there are women who are victimized by gangs. Is there any more treatment of young women in the rest of the series? And if not, why not?
It's a good question, and I would say, first of all, we wanted a woman on this panel, and I'm sorry that Brooke Barnett is not here. The panel was originally scheduled, I think, for a couple of weeks ago when the snowstorm hit. And Brooke was going to join us on the panel, but she is in the middle of final statements on a murder trial right now, so unfortunately she couldn't be here with us. And she is a main character in the second season. The first season, I don't know if you got to see it, but there was a couple, Jada and Creep. Jada is a Blood and Creep is a Crip, but she was really the main character along with the mayor and Director McCarthy in the first season. So I hear what you're saying, and I think it's valid, and unfortunately Brooke couldn't make it today. As you'll see, if you follow the series and see what happens with Jaweh and Brooke and how they proceed, I hope you'll revisit your opinion.
And just one thing to add to it that may not be clear, Michelle Thomas is the business administrator for the city of Newark during this filming. She's subsequently left, but all department directors report to her. So she's a very powerful character. She's the one who's always talking. She was the one talking about Sanford and Son. But she's a very powerful character in the city at the time, and she gets an awful lot.
She is also a major character throughout the series. That's true.
I think I'll let you have a private discussion with them afterwards, okay? Because I have a few other people who are standing at the microphones.
Well, Jada that's Jada, who I thought might be here, but what? Oh, okay. She may be here in a few minutes, but yeah. Sir.
Hey, my name's Garrett. I'm originally from New Jersey. On that theme of gentrification and poverty specifically, Jaweh, do you think the people that you're helping, that the end goal, because things are still hard in Newark, is to leave Newark eventually? If you have those opportunities, it's to leave. Or is it to go get these opportunities and come back and improve the situation there?
Initially, I mean, everybody can't leave. Some are going to be just stuck. So those that are stuck, they make it work. But you do, I'm one of them. I'm not necessarily in Newark every day. I just came back from LA this morning. So I'm all around, doing what I do, but a lot of what I'm accumulating throughout my travels is what I bring back to my city. So I think it's a combination of both that you need.
Sir, last question.
My name is Rick Domas. I live here in Cambridge. And I know the episode we saw tonight was just one episode of a series, but it was heavily oriented to the police. And urban transformation includes inner city education and trash pickup and pothole repair. And is the mayor as innovative in those areas, and will those be portrayed in the series?
This season, the first season really focused on public safety, which is, Mayor Booker was elected, that was the #1 issue. This season actually moves more into the economic crisis, the budget crisis, during an election season, because the mayor was up for re-election. And in this show you just saw, which is the first episode, you saw the election of Governor Christie, and you saw that moment at the end of the act where the mayor was sitting there, and you know, I can only imagine what he was thinking in terms of recalibrating his own political future and fortunes. So this season is the budget crisis that hits a city, how it impacts different people, and it is, on a personal level, Jawi's decision to take his self-defense to trial and what happens. We're now in discussions and whether there'll be a third season. As you heard earlier, the mayor, you know, has gotten this grant, the mayor and the governor, from Mark Zuckerberg, a matching grant of $100 million. So that means if they match it, that's $200 million coming into the city. So the focus would certainly shift to education as an arena with this kind of activity going on. So yeah, the idea, if this continues, would be each season to kind of try to bring another area in the focus.
I just want to add to that very quickly. You know, Mayor Booker was elected on a platform that started with public safety. And the reason why it started with public safety is because the biggest problem in Newark is crime and poverty, and people need jobs. And then obviously the things that go along with that. So the mayor's plan was to first make the city safe, bring industry to the city, which will then get jobs for the people who live here. And that's the bigger picture that's going on. And then with it comes the education system, which is run by the state, not by the city. So there's kind of a conflict there, which the mayor doesn't have as much control over, but the deal where we got the $100 million for education is now being worked out to have a stronger hand for the city and the mayor, and those details are now being worked out. The bottom line is all of those things that you mentioned are all part of the mayor's vision, and it may not come across here, but that's the reason why he's so hell-bent on making the city safe and the police department.
Join me in thanking our panel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming. Really.